He lived the American dream, rising through the club professional ranks to become an elite-level golfer, and his is a story for the ages. He was born in 1906 and given the name Henry Guilford Picard, but his friends called him Pic. Picard's golfing life began in 1920 as a caddy and club steward at Plymouth Country Club in Massachusetts. He landed his first job as an assistant pro 5 years later in 1925. The same year, he won his first tournament. He continued as a teaching pro, even as his career on the PGA Tour began to flourish.
Those days, most guys played the tour and had a club job. That was what a lot of guys did in those days.
In the decade leading up to World War II, Picard emerged as one of the tour's brightest stars, winning more than 24 titles. He took 6 events in 1939 alone and led the tour in earnings that same year, competing against the likes of Ben Hogan, Sam Snead, and Byron Nelson. Picard won the 1938 Masters by 2 strokes and beat Byron Nelson in a playoff 1 year later for the 1939 PGA Championship. Armed with a passion for helping others learn the game, Picard could be seen on the practice tee doling out advice.
As you get older, he says, the first thing that goes are your legs. And he said, if you have too much weight on your body, they go quicker. So he said, stay thin to win.
Ben Hogan dedicated his first instructional book to Picard, writing that his recommendation, words of encouragement, and golfing hints have helped me more than I can ever repay.
I think the thing that he took great pride in, his Masters victory, his PGA victory, but his friendship and what he taught Hogan and Hogan's appreciation was something he held near and dear.
The 1945 Miami Open was Henry Picard's final victory, but he continued giving back to the game as a head professional until his retirement nearly 30 years later. His strength rested not only in winning major championships or striking a perfect ball, but in the way in which he kept the game alive, the grace with which he continued to grow the game long after his playing days were over.
Honoring Henry with a special tribute is another individual with strong Charleston ties, a youngster in her own right with 33 career wins on the LPGA Tour, inducted in 2000 into the World Golf Hall of Fame, member Beth Daniel. Come on, Beth.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to return to the World Golf Hall of Fame each fall to celebrate the game's history and those who have contributed to its success. To that end, I would first like to congratulate all the 2006 inductees and their families who are here with us this evening. I know what a special night this is for you. It's just one evening, but it represents a lifetime of accomplishments and dedication, and it's a night you're sure to reflect on and cherish for many years to come. Congratulations again. Tonight, it is truly an honor to speak to you on behalf of the Picard family as we celebrate Mr. Henry Picard's lifetime of achievements and his induction into the World Golf Hall of Fame. I want to thank the Picard family for this privilege. I only hope I can do justice to the man who has meant so much to many people, myself included. I knew Mr. Picard from the time I began to play golf as a little girl in Charleston until his passing in 1997. Nearly 50 years separated us in age, yet the game of golf, as it does with so many strangers turned friends, brought us together. Now, he was quite the figure at the Country Club of Charleston, tall and handsome, always wearing his cotton dress shirt and tie, even in the 100-degree heat. To a little 8-year-old kid just learning the game, this legendary golfer was an imposing figure. I was definitely intimidated by him. In fact, there were times when I would see him coming down the path looking for me, and I would hide behind the big oak tree by the first tee. You see, he would always ask me a question about golf, like, how do you hit the ball high? How do you hit a fade? Something usually related to the swing. And then he would walk away. At 8 years old, I didn't have the answer to his questions, but I knew I had the rest of the day to work on it. And he knew I would go out and hit ball after ball all day long and figure it out. That was his way of building my work ethic, helping me to develop my shot making, and instilling in me a purpose on the golf course and a love for practice. At the end of the day, he would find me again. If I got the answer wrong, he would explain why and help me understand that particular lesson, how to hit it high or how to hit a fade. But if my answer was correct, he would simply say thank you and walk away. That's it. Mr. Picard was a man of few words, and he did this with his pupils on the range as well. Rather than "that's right" or "see, that's how it's done," when they did something correctly, he would just say thank you and move on to the next lesson. One day I went to my golf bag and I discovered it was full of brand new Bellata golf balls. You have to understand, as a kid, I played with whatever golf balls I could find, so I felt like I'd hit the lottery. When I realized he was the one who had done it, I gathered up the courage to thank him. He just looked at me and said, "You should be playing with the right kind of golf balls," and walked away. That was it. That was his way. So our relationship was a quiet one, but I learned a great deal from this shy and humble man. And I knew him well enough to know that he would have been uncomfortable with the events of this evening. All the hoopla and compliments would have embarrassed him. You see, even though he played very successfully in an era with Byron Nelson, Ben Hogan, and Sam Snead, little is known about his career in the great man that he was. And that would probably be just fine with him. But it's not just fine with me. He left an indelible mark on this game, and he deserves to be mentioned each time we speak about golf's legendary players. Henry Picard grew up in Plymouth, Massachusetts as a caddy at the Plymouth Country Club. He played whenever he could and began to develop a pretty good game. In 1925, at the age of 18, he was given the opportunity to move to Charleston, South Carolina, to be the assistant pro at the Country Club of Charleston. He jumped at the chance, and his life in professional golf was underway. While there, Mr. Picard learned the ins and outs of being a club pro, but he also had the time to practice and play. He would participate in matches with members of the club in order to sharpen his game, and would often play with Frank Ford Sr., who was a great amateur player at that time. These matches made him a better player, but more importantly, a tougher competitor. He began to enter some local events and won the Carolina Open in his first attempt in 1925. Gradually, he began to branch out and play more on a national level. He was winning tournaments and gaining confidence, and in 1935, he officially joined the PGA Tour. Times were tough then. The money was not great. No million-dollar purses or endorsement deals, as the country was still suffering the effects of the Great Depression. So to save on expenses, the guys would drive to tournaments together and share rooms. On Mondays and Tuesdays, the top players would play in exhibition matches at local clubs to make some extra cash, and a little side betting helped with expenses. This is how the best players of that era survived playing the game they loved. In his first full year on tour, 1935, Mr. Picard finished second on the money list. The 1939 season was his best. He was the leading money winner, earning $10,300. He stayed on tour only 5 full seasons, mainly because he wanted to spend more time at home with his wife and 4 children. He made those seasons count, however, winning 25 times, including 2 major championships, the 1938 Masters and the 1939 PGA Championship. He also played on 2 Ryder Cup teams. In his entire professional career, he won 36 times. Also throughout his career, he was the head professional at 6 golf clubs. He started at the Country Club of Charleston, represented Hershey Country Club while he was on the tour, and ended his career at Seminole Golf Club. He was as much a teacher as he was a player. Mr. Picard was well liked and respected by his fellow competitors, and he was known as a very hard worker who spent long hours perfecting his game. I recently heard a story from a friend of Mr. Picard that illustrates his work ethic. Mr. Picard called a pro that he knew to ask him if he could come to his club to practice for an upcoming event. The pro, of course, said yes, and a couple of days later, Mr. Picard arrived. He went out on the golf course and he picked out a spot from where he would hit balls for the rest of the week with various clubs. He assured the pro that he would not disturb any of its members. After about 3 days of hitting balls into a large tree, Mr. Picard walked into the shop and asked the pro to come out and watch him. He told the pro he felt like he had mastered what he had been working on. Well, the pro had been looking out the window, and he said, "Well, I sure hope so, because you've killed the area of grass that you've been hitting from, and you're about to kill the tree." At that point, Mr. Picard quietly pulled out his 2-iron and hit a shot right over the top of the tree. He said he had been practicing high, soft, long irons for the course that he was playing the next week. This story took place in 1938. The course he was practicing for was Augusta National, and it was the week before he won the Masters. Mr. Picard was also very generous with his time and money. He was known to offer financial help to players and friends in need, and he gave his time to players on tour who needed help with their games. He had a very good eye when it came to the golf swing. The teacher he went to early in his career for swing fundamentals was Alex Morrison, and he helped many of the players of his era with these same principles. Ben Hogan sought advice from him over the years, and Mr. Picard is credited with helping him to correct the hook that gave him so much trouble early in his career. Hogan was quoted as saying that Henry Picard was the greatest teacher he ever knew. Hogan also dedicated his first book, Power Golf, to him, saying that Mr. Picard, quote, was a great golfer, and he remains one of my best and favorite friends. He was so kind and generous, and his encouragement gave me the inspiration to keep playing in my early years. I could go on with many more stories, but at the heart of each is the fact that Mr. Picard set a great example to all of us who knew him. He was also an inspiration both on and off the golf course to those of us who aspire to attain success and respect. He was a great family man, player, teacher, and friend who never asked for honors or celebration, only respect. So as we welcome Henry Picard to his rightful place in history within the World Golf Hall of Fame, I know he is looking down on us and would simply like to say, thank you.